Okay guys, so in this video today I'm going to be building out the Airbnb listing page you see here. It's going to have the map on the right hand side, which is a Google map. On the left hand side we're going to have all the listings showing, and it's also going to have some hover states, and we're also going to have the hover states for the elements of the navigation and the header. We're going to be using SCSS. I'm going to be using Parcel to compile my SCSS down to CSS. I'm going to leave a link in the description to one of my other videos if you want to set that up yourself. Also, if you want to download the repository, the link will be in the description, and it just takes you to a sign-up form for my mailing list. I don't send you any spam. It'll just purely be for new videos and updates to my repositories. Okay, so we have an index.html file, and I've included a styles.scss file. The styles file contains some fonts. I've declared some colors on the root, and I've also declared some default font styling. I've also included the icons in a folder, so if you clone the repository, you'll be able to retrieve them. To begin with, I'm just going to go to the site, and I'm just going to have a look at the current Airbnb site. I'm just going to analyze this header. I'm just going to break it down into 3 sections. So we've got the logo, middle, and the navigation. In my HTML, I'm going to do a header, dot header, which is going to give me a class of header. And then I'm going to do a header underscore logo. This is going to give me a div to put the logo in. So I'm just going to call that image file. I'm going to go back to my document, and as you can see, it doesn't look the same as Airbnb's. So I'm just going to give this header, I'll just move this to the right. I'm going to give the header class a height of 80 pixels. I'm going to do padding not 24 pixels. I'm going to do display flex. I'm going to do align items center. This should centralize the Airbnb logo vertically. And I'm just going to do a box shadow. I'm going to do RGBA, not for black. I'm going to do 0.08. And I'm going to do 0 pixels, 1 pixels, 12 pixels. So this gives us the border, the box shadow underneath. I'm now going to do this sort of input, but I analyzed the HTML, and these are just 3 buttons, because if you click them, it pops out this sort of full search functionality. But we're just going to do the buttons for now. I'm going to do another div, and I'm going to call this search. I'm going to do a button, and I'm going to say selected map area. I'm going to do a span for the separator, so for this, and then I'm going to do the date. I'm going to do another span for the separator, and then I'm going to do another button for one guest, and I'm also going to do a div in here, and I'm going to call it header underscore search icon. And I'm just going to include the image. So if we go back to the document, it'll look a bit of a mess. So within the header div, you can just do ampersand underscore search. This is essentially going to just take this dot header, it's going to like paste it there. And it's just an easier way of doing styling when you're using BEM. And I'm just going to do display flex. I'm going to do display inline flex actually. And I'm going to do border radius 24 pixels. Overflow hidden. So this gives us the border here. And I'm just going to do align items center. And I'm going to give it a border 1 pixel solid, and I'm just going to take this variable. I'm going to use it by doing var and then pasting the variable inside there. So that gives us this border going around, and I'm just going to do button to target all buttons and do background transparent. Then I'm going to give it a fixed height of 48 pixel for each of the buttons, and I'm going to give it some padding. And I'm just looking at this now, and you can see the icon is like sort of broken because it's just massive. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do another div, search icon, and I'm going to give this a fixed width of 32 pixels and a height of 32 pixels. I'm going to give it a border radius of 50%, and I'm going to do background var pink. And then I'm going to target the image inside the icon. So it's the SVG in this case. I'm going to give it a width of 12 pixels and a height of 12 pixels. And that icon now it's not centered. So go back to the search icon. I'm going to do align items, center, justify content, center. But for these two properties to work, I'm going to do display flex. That's going to bring it up to the middle. So because this text is on the left, it's meant to be on the left hand side, but it's not. I'm just going to do display flex on the button, which is going to bring it to the left hand side. I'm going to do align items, center. So that brings it out. I'm also going to remove the border on this button. And I'm just going to do a span. Do width 1 pixel, height 24 pixel, and I'm going to take the grey colour again, do background grey to give us the separator, and I just want to give some padding or some margin to the left hand side of this button. So I'm just going to do margin left 16 pixels. If we look at the original, you can see there's a little bit less sort of padding on the search element here. To conquer that, what I'm going to do is, let me think. I'm just going to inspect the page. Okay, so what I'll do is, on the button, I'm going to do last of type. I'm going to do padding right 7 pixels. So that's giving us like less padding on that side. And for the start, so first of type, I'm going to give some additional padding. So I'm going to do 24 pixels. So that gives us a little bit more padding there. Oops, it should be padding left. Okay, that's great. I also want to change the fonts on these buttons. So I'm going to do font family, circular medium. And obviously this element is not in the middle yet. To do that, we just want to add our other div. So we're going to do header __ nav. And then on the header element, I'm going to do justify content, space between. That's going to bring that element over. And I'm just going to target the logo div. I'm going to target the nav div. And I'm going to do flex, grow 1, 0. And then I want to give it a basis of 140 pixels. So that's going to put it in the middle, and it's going to remain in the middle. I also want to do the hover state. As you can see, we've got a little hover state here. So I'm going to make another div. Oops, no, I don't need to do that. on the search div, and I'm going to do a harvest it, and I'm going to do box shadow 0 pixels, 2 pixels, 4 pixels, and I'm just going to give it RGBA, and we'll just do 0.18. And of course that's a bit too sharp, so we can give it a transition on the search element. 0.2 seconds is, and we just want to give a cursor pointer on the buttons. Cool, so that looks pretty similar to me. So now I just want to tackle this nav. As you can see, we got 3 buttons, or this is actually a href, so it's an A-link. This would probably be a button, and this would be a button because it's like triggering JavaScript. So within this nav, I just want to do 3 elements. I'm going to do A, and I give us a class of head underscore underscore nav underscore underscore button, and I just want to write become a host, and then I want to do a button. I'm going to give it the same class for now, and I'm just going to call an icon which is called globe, and then I've got another icon which is chevron down, I believe. So we've got these 2 icons there, and let's just do the account one. So I'm going to copy this down, and I just want to change this to, I think it was hamburger, and I think it was account. I'm just going to add the nav property, ampersand underscore underscore nav, and I want to do display flex, and I'll say justify content end, save that, and just analyze the page. Okay, I think this might need to be flex end. Okay, I'm going to change this to flex end, and then yeah, we can start styling the buttons. So I'm just going to do an ampersand underscore underscore button. So we're now targeting this div, or this A-link in this case, because I'm taking this. So underscore nav, and then adding on underscore button. I do background transparent, border none, display flex again, align items, center, justify content center. And you'll notice with CSS these days, you'll see this everywhere because it's so easy to center items. Before you used to have to either use text align center, but you used to have issues. But just doing these 3 properties just saves you so much time. Do padding 12 pixels, 16 pixels, border radius 22 pixels, do cursor pointer. So these icons are obviously way too big now, so we can just conquer that by doing, I'm just going to copy this, and we're going to do hyphen language. And I'm just going to add it on here again. I'm just going to do image first child, so we're just targeting the first image. I'm going to do width of 16 pixels, height of 16 pixels, and I'm going to do last child. Width of 9 pixels, height of 6 pixels, margin left 6 pixels. And that's not working, so okay, that's because I didn't have the right icon. We now want to do the same for account. So I just want to copy this, and I'm going to do -account, maybe not in capitals, and do the same. So I'm going to do image, first child, height 16 pixels, width 16 pixels, and last child I'm going to do width 30 pixels, height 30 pixels, and margin left 12 pixels. This doesn't seem to be working again because I haven't saved the file. And as you can see, the icons are looking pretty similar to the site. And I just want to do the hover states now. So because the hover states only appear on the first 2 buttons, well, they're the same, I'm just going to add a class to 2 of those elements. I'm going to do copy it again and do grey hover. I'm going to take this class and add it here. And I'm just going to do and grey hover. And what we'll do is on hover background var grey light. Save that. And as you can see, it's looking similar to the original, but something doesn't feel right. Okay, I'm going to bring the padding down. And I'm just going to remove the text decoration. And I'm just going to give it a default color of okay, so I've just added a height of 48 pixels just so it's the same size as these, and it seems to look the same. We just need to do the state for the account button. So this is slightly different. On the account element, we just want to give it a border, 1 pixel solid grey light. And we just want to give it a fixed height of 42 pixels, border radius of 22 pixels, and padding of 5 pixels, 5 pixels, 5 pixels, 12 pixels. Transition, box shadow. And let's give it a hover state. 0 pixels, 2 pixels, 4 pixels, and black color with the opacity of 0.18. So I just need to change this from grey light to grey med. And there we go. Okay, so I'm now going to tackle the main section. And to begin with, I just want to make a div to contain it all. I'm going to do .main, and then within here I'm going to do .main __ content. And this is going to contain all the content on the left hand side. And we're also going to make a div .main __ map to contain the map. With this main content div, in the CSS, I just want to give it a min height of calc 100 view height minus 80 pixels. I'm just going to give it a background red so you can see, and I'm going to give it a width of 840 pixels. So yeah, as you can see, it lines up the same there. I'm going to get rid of the background color, and I'm going to start building out the HTML. So I'm going to give it a span for this. Paste that in, and I'm going to do a H1 for the title. I'm going to do a div for the filters, and just going to paste these buttons in quickly. And I give them two classes, one outlined and one curved, in case we need to use them again later. Okay, great. And I now want to give it the padding, the same padding as the header. So what I want to do is on the content, I'm going to do padding left for now. I'm going to do 24 pixels. I'm going to do padding top 60 pixels. So that brings this sort of in line. I then want to target the H1 and give it some margin at the top. And I think the size might be a little bit off. So I just want to increase the size a bit. Okay, I'll just give it a the font size to 34 pixels. I then want to do these buttons. Oops, let me just get rid of this. So for the buttons, what we want to do is we want to make a button element. I'm going to do it outside the main div in case we want to use it again later. And I'm going to give this a default styling of 8 pixels by 16 pixels. Outline none. Background transparent. And we'll give it a margin 0 by default. And then we'll do dot outlined. So if it has the outlined class, give it a border 1 pixel solid of B000. And on hover, let's do border color of 222. Let me just double check we're not using that already. Yeah, so I'm going to use the variable instead. Okay, so if we hover them now, we've got the outline showing, and we also want to do the dot curved class. So the dot curved class is just going to have a border radius of 30 pixels. Okay, it's starting to look a lot more like it now. So I just want to give the main filters a little bit of margin at the top. So to do that, within the main div, I'm going to do filters. I'm going to do padding top 25 pixels. And for each of the buttons, I'm going to do margin right 6 pixels. Also, I think we need to add a little bit more. So a little bit less padding there. So let's just say 20. 15. and maybe a little margin underneath the span. Oops, not there. Okay, so margin top, we'll just do 16 pixels. 18 pixels maybe. Okay, that looks close enough for now. Maybe we can go back and tidy it up later if we need to. Just going to take this text, and then I'm going to do another div called scarcity. I'm just going to put the scarcity div just under the filters. And for this I'm going to include an image, and I've got an image already called, let's see, okay, it's called calendar.gif. And I'm just going to paste that in there as a span. I'm going to target this div, display flex, and then I'm going to do align items center. So that's going to bring it down to the center. And then I'm also going to wrap some of this text, so up until the first dot, with another span. And I'm just going to do span, font, family, circular, bold. I'm just going to clean up this mistake. And the same with this, I need to add some padding. So I'm going to just do padding top, 30 pixels. And for the image, just going to do margin right, 15 pixels. So we've got that bit of space in there. So I'm now going to start building out these listings. So I'm now going to do a div for listings. And within here I'm going to do listings underscore item. Within here I just want to do a div for the image. And we'll just give it the image for now, and we'll just, I've got a random image here, so I'm just going to paste it in. And next to the image we want to do a div for the content, so let's just do listings underscore content. Div for the title, and then within here we can do a span. I'm going to do a span for this private room in Birkenhead, and I'm just going to do a H2. I'm going to copy the name, let's take it from here. I'm also going to give us a class actually of grey text. I'm also going to add a span for the separator. Oh, I'm going to do a div actually. I'll do a div under the title for separator. So back in the CSS, I'm going to do another div for listings. And I'm just going to do ampersand underscore item so we can target the item. And to begin with, let's just give it a border top. And we've got this border up here, so I'm going to do border top 1 pixel solid. EB. And I just want to give some padding, 24 pixels, not, and display flex as usual. So obviously the image is massive at the moment. We're going to want to target that div as well, so let's do underscore image, width 300 pixels, height 200 pixels, and border radius 10 pixels. Overflow hidden, so we can actually see the corners. And let's target the image and do object fit cover. So this is gonna, well, it should have spread it out across the div, but didn't seem to work. Okay, so my styling doesn't seem to be being applied to this div. So if you look here, this says there's no styling. So I'm going to go back to CSS and see what the problem is. So listings underscore image. That's because we got one underscore. Okay, great. And we need to give this a height of 100% and a width of 100%. Because if you look now, we're just seeing the top left of the image. If I save this now, you see the full image. It's quite similar to background position cover. And you used to have to put images on the background instead of being able to actually have the image in the HTML, which is a bit annoying, but it works now. So okay, so I'm just going to style this grey text now. I'm going to make a new CSS property called grey text. And the reason I'm doing it outside of this is because we need to use it again later. And I give it a height of 14 pixels, line height 18 pixels, color var grey text light. And I'm going to do font family circular light. Oops, I think that's a bit too light. Grey text light, okay. And I'm just going to add this icon in. And I'm going to do that by going into the title div and making, actually, within the title div, yeah, I'm going to separate this out by doing another div called listings underscore text. I'm going to move this into here. And I'm going to do another div for listings underscore title icon underscore title underscore icon. Let me just add the icon back in here. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to give display flex on this title element, and I want to keep these both separated to the left hand side, and I want the icon to be on the right hand side. So it's just a cleaner way of doing it. I'm just going to call the icon, which is called heart. So now on the title element, if we do display, well, I'll show you before we do display flex. This element's going to be down here. And now if I do display flex, it's going to move it up to the top right, sorry. And I just want to do justify content, space between. Let me just see what's happening. Guessing the width isn't 100%. So if we add a width of 100% on this and on the content, it'll move the elements out. Let me see what's happening. Okay, so on the content element in the CSS, let's just do width calc, and then we remember that the image is 100%, so we're going to do 300 pixels. 100% minus 300 pixels is going to give us 100%. That's moved the element out to the side, and we just want to add some padding to the left hand side of the title. Actually, it might be better if we do padding on the content. So padding left 15 pixels because we want to add some more elements later, and we want that padding to be applied there as well. So I'm just going to wrap this image in a button, and I'm just going to target the button inside title. Like we didn't really need to even give these class names. I could just target the button directly because there's no other button, but if you were doing it in a real case scenario, you'd probably want to be cleaner and keep it like this. So I'm just adding some styling to the button which contains the SVG. I'm just going to do display, outline and position relative. To display flex again, align items. If I just give us a background of red so we can see, I'm going to give it a height of, no, actually I'm not going to give this a height. I'm going to give it a pseudo element, so I need to make it a position relative. Then I'm going to give it a pseudo element, so I'm going to do after, position absolute, content. You always have to give a pseudo element a blank content, even if you just want to use it for a shape. Then I'm going to do width 48 pixels, height 48 pixels, border radius 50%, and I'm going to do Z index -1. And if I just remove the red color, the reason I'm doing this is because if you look on the main Airbnb site, the shadow, like the top of the hat, is in line with this text, and then the outline background, so the background, the grey background, is further out of the div than the element. So you can achieve this by doing a pseudo element. So if we just do on hover now, we can do after, and just do opacity 1. Then give the opacity 0 by default. Okay, that's not working. Of course, we need to give it a background, so we'll do var grey light. And we now just need to move this so it's in line with the top here. And I think we need to do, let's think. So I'm just going to wrap this image in a button. And I'm just going to target the button inside title. Like we didn't really need to even give these class names. I could just target the button directly because there's no other button, but if you were doing it in a real case scenario, you'd probably want to be cleaner and keep it like this. So I'm just adding some styling to the button which contains the SVG. I'm just going to do display, outline and position relative. To display flex again, align items. If I just give us a background of red so we can see, I'm going to give it a height of, no, actually I'm not going to give this a height. I'm going to give it a pseudo element, so I need to make it a position relative. Then I'm going to give it a pseudo element, so I'm going to do after, position absolute, content. You always have to give a pseudo element a blank content, even if you just want to use it for a shape. Then I'm going to do width 48 pixels, height 48 pixels, border radius 50%, and I'm going to do Z index -1. And if I just remove the red color, the reason I'm doing this is because if you look on the main Airbnb site, the shadow, like the top of the hat, is in line with this text, and then the outline background, so the background, the grey background, is further out of the div than the element. So you can achieve this by doing a pseudo element. So if we just do on hover now, we can do after, and just do opacity 1. Then give the opacity 0 by default. Okay, that's not working. Of course, we need to give it a background, so we'll do var grey light. And we now just need to move this so it's in line with the top here. And I think we need to do, let's think. And because this isn't in line, I just need to remove the default styling on the default padding on the button. Let me just go back to this. So do padding 0 on the button. That's going to move it up to the top. And now you can see the pseudo class is showing the grey background outside of the line, which looks good. I'm just going to do cursor pointer. And for this title, we're going to want to give it a thinner font. So I'm just going to do H2 underneath this button. And I'm going to do font size 18 pixels. Just make sure the color is the same. So grey, text dark. Then I'm going to give it some margin. So I'm going to give a margin top of 5 pixels and then 10 pixels on the bottom. And I'm going to change the font to circular medium or circular. Let's try book. And I'm just going to give it a font weight of 400. So that looks a lot better now. So now I'm going to style the separator beneath. Just going to spell it correctly first and then target the div. And I'm just going to do width of 32 pixels, height 1 pixel, background var grey med. And let's just check the spacing. We may want to give it a margin. So underneath the H2, let's give the margin bottom 15 pixels instead. Okay, I'm now going to continue on with a description box. As you can see, the date has changed, but that's only because I'm recording it the following day. I'm going to do a div beneath the separator called listings __ description. And within this, I'm going to do listings __ no, actually, within here I'm going to do a span, and I'm going to use the same class as we used for the grey text previously. And I'm just going to copy in some of the content. So I'm going to say 2 guests, and I'll just do 1 bedroom. Don't need to copy everything. I'm also going to sort this underscore out here that I've noticed was wrong. And I'm just going to do 1 more span with grey text as a class. And we're just going to say kitchen, Wi-Fi, and heating. So if we look back at our application, we can see the text beneath. I'm just going to target this div in the CSS. And I'm just going to do span display block. So that should bring it down to the next line. And I'm just going to add some padding to the top. of description, 15 pixels, to give some space in. And with the span, I'm going to do margin bottom 5 pixels, just to give it some more space. Okay, so I'm now going to move on to this like ratings and price section. I'm going to do another div beneath description, and I'm going to call it details. So I'm going to do dot listings details, and I'm going to do dot listings ratings for the left hand side, and this is going to have an image, and the image is called star. And we're also going to do a span with 15 for the rating, span, and then 14 for the amount of feedback left. Oops, not 15, 5. So obviously the star is going to be way too big at this stage. So we're just going to target the details div again and add another div called dot listings underscore price. And within here we're going to do a div for dot listings underscore price underscore night. Copy this down and do one for total. The night is going to have 29, and we're going to do another span within here. And we're going to do a span inside this total for 57 total. Okay, so I'm just going to sort out the size of this star, and to do that I just want to target the rating div, and I want to do display flex, and I want to target the image. I want to give it a width of 14 pixels and a margin right of 4 pixels. That's going to bring in next door to it. And I also want to do margin top on this rating, and I'm going to do auto. So this will come apparent in a bit. We just want to change the font on the spans as well. So let's just do span, font family, circular book. And let's give the font a color of, now we can leave the color as it is for that. And we want to target the span inside the span. So we'll do another span property over here and do font family, circular book, and change the one above it to medium. So this is going to give us a lighter font within the inner span. And let's just do font, let's just do color for grey light. Okay, great. So if we now target the details div, because we want to move this pricing over to the right hand side. So if we do ampersand underscore price, no, actually details, we're going to do display flex, and we do flex, what was it, justify content, space between. That's going to bring it over to the right hand side. We can now target the price div and do text align right, so it aligns the text there. And on details, it's going to do margin top auto, because we want to bring this down to here. But for this to work, we're actually going to need to add some additional styling to the content div, I believe. Yeah, so on the listings content, for us to be able to do flex margin auto, so margin top auto, we need to do display flex and flex direction column on the content div. So I'm just going to search for content. I'm just going to paste those properties there. So now we've got the price at the bottom, which looks similar. And we just want to style the right hand side. So to do that, I'm just going to target at the price div again. And I want to display flex and do flex direction column. So we want to put them on top of each other like they are. And I'll do target the night div within there, do font size 18 pixels, then do font family circular bold. And I'm going to target the span within there, do color 484848, save that. And that's just basically giving us the lighter colored text on the right hand side and slightly larger font. And we're just going to do the nightly price, or the total price, sorry. And to do that, we just give it a font size of 14 pixels, a color of var grey text light. Let's do text decoration, underline, and give it a margin top of 2 pixels. So that's looking a lot more like the Airbnb site now. We actually might want to make this font slightly lighter, so on the span we can do circular, and we can do font weight. Let's see what's happening. I've used circular bold instead of book. So if we move this down to the span and remove that font weight 200, we should have it looking a lot better. And now let's copy this back up and add bold onto the night. So we've got a bold font for the full span, and then we overwrite the inner span with a lighter font. Okay, so I'm now just going to go back to the HTML, and I'm going to copy down this listing section, so the item section. I just want to see how it looks. So it's looking pretty similar to the original. If we can add some more padding beneath this, I think it'll bring it all together. So the main scarcity, let's add padding bottom 30. Okay, so we're now going to style the map section. So to begin with, I'm just going to make a div called main__Google map. And within there, I'm just going to do a span with the text map. I'm then going to target this in the CSS, and I'm just going to do __map. And I'm going to give it a background color of red so we can see what we're working with. I'm then going to do a width of, actually I'm going to do calc 100% minus 840 pixels, because if you remember, the width of the left hand column was 840 pixels. And if we go back to the page now, you're going to see that at the bottom we're seeing the div, but obviously we want it to be on the right hand side. So to do that, I'm just going to add a position absolute, and I'm going to do right 0, then that's going to bring it over to the right hand side. I'm then going to want to get it to the top, so I'm going to need to add a top property of 0, and now you can see it's showing at the top of the whole document because we haven't set a relative position to the main div. So if we do that now, we can then see that the map is actually sticking to the main div, to the top of the main div. We also want to add a bottom property. If we do bottom 0, it's going to span the whole width of the main div. And obviously the main div is very long at this point because we've got bigger section on the left. And as you can see on the right of the map, it sticks on the Airbnb site. So to do that, we're just going to want to target the main__Google map div. And we want to give it a height of 100 VH because we want it to be the height of the document. And we then want to give it a, let's think, display flex And let's do the align items center and justify content center. So this is going to bring the span with map inside to the middle of the document. But of course it's not fixed like the Airbnb site. And the way we do that is by adding a position sticky. And we're going to do top 0. So this is going to stick to the top position of the map div when it reaches the top. So obviously it looks a bit weird at the moment, and this is because we haven't given the header a fixed position. So if we go back to the header property in the CSS and we just add a position fixed, we'll also need to give it a width of 100%. And as you can see now, it's like sort of hiding behind the rest of the document. So to contact that, we are going to need to give a Z index to the main. No, actually, we're going to need to give a Z index to the header to bring it in front of the rest of the document. So if you just do Z index and we'll just give it a number 2, it's going to bring it in front. So we then need to give it a background color of white. And now we need to compensate for the fixed height with some padding on our main section. So if we just add padding top 80 pixels, that will compensate for the 80 pixels we just lost. And that looks about the same. So now I'm noticing we haven't got the padding right on the main element. So I'm just going to change this padding property so it shows padding the shorthand. So I'm going to do 60 pixels for the top and move it up there. Then I'm going to do 24 pixels for the right and left, and then do 0 for the bottom. Just going to save this and look at the document. Yeah, that looks a lot more like Airbnb site now. So I'm just going to change this color from red because it looks a bit sort of too in your face. I'm going to change it to pink. That looks a lot better. As you can see, the map is fixed on the right hand side and the left scrolls. Okay, I'm now going to do the footer section. So back in the code, underneath the main div, I'm just going to do a footer. And I want to do a div. And within here, I'm going to do a H4 and do about. And I'm just going to copy some of the text on the page. I'm going to do a UL. And then I'm just going to wrap these all in the LIs. And I'm doing Option W to wrap the elements. Okay, I'm just going to do them. I'll move this so it's inside the UL. And then I'm just going to duplicate this div section. And just to move them back so they're next door to each other, I'm just going to do footer, display flex. And I'm going to give this a background color of far grey light. I'm going to do border top 1 pixels solid, and I'm just going to do DDD, and I can't remember the name of the variable, so grey med. And of course we need to add the padding, so let's just do padding 24 pixels. Actually, the padding seems to be a lot shorter here. So what we can do is we can do another div called container within footer. We can move all these elements inside there. And we can just do a div inside footer called container, do max width, let's say 800 pixels. I'm just going to remove these display flex property into the container. I do margin auto. Then I'm going to do justify content, space between. And I'm just going to bring up the size to say 1200 pixels. And I'm just going to duplicate this a couple of times. And then I'm going to target the UL. And I'm going to do list style type none. I'm going to do margin left 0. Sorry, padding left 0. And for the li elements, I'm just going to do margin bottom 15 pixels. Do font family circular book. And for the H4s, I'm just going to do text transform uppercase. And I'm also going to bring the font size down. Let's try 12 pixels. I'm also going to add some padding to the footer again. So I'm going to do padding, let's say 80 pixels 0. And that looks a bit more similar. Okay, maybe a little bit less padding, so let's just say 30. Okay, so the main reason I was doing this was to show you that the map then releases as soon as this div ends. And I'm not going to do the lower section here because I think it's kind of unnecessary. But if you want to add it, you can just clone the repository and do so. I'm now going to do these chevrons. And to do that, I just want to go back into the image div for each of the listing items. So I'm going to go back up. I'm just going to do the first element in the list. So we've got listing item, listings image. I just want to do 2 buttons within here. And I want to do an image with icons chevron left. And I'm going to do the same but change it to right. I'm just going to go to the image section within the CSS, and then I'm going to do button. I'm going to do position absolute. And let's just see how it looks at the moment. See the buttons are just like messed up. And I want to do top 50%. And of course we need to do the position relative on the element. And then I'm going to give these a width of 32 pixels and a height of 32 pixels. And I can't even see them at the moment. So I'm just going to do image width 10 pixels, height 10 pixels. And I'm just going to give the button a background of white. And do border radius 50%, overflow hidden. And do padding 0. Display flex. Align items, center, justify content, center. Border none. And then I want to target the second button. So what I can do is use the last of type element CSS selector and do last of type. I'm going to do right 10%. And I'm going to do first of type. So this is just going to target the first button. And I'm going to do left 10 pixels. So that should bring them across like that. And I just want to do some like a transition now. So we don't want it to display by default. So we're just going to do opacity 0. Going to give it a transition of 0.2 seconds in. And then what we're going to do is when somebody hovers the item, we want to target this button. And we're going to do that by doing ampersand. Now we're just going to do dot listings underscore image. I'm going to do opacity 1. On the button, button opacity 1. We're just going to increase the opacity to maybe the transition to maybe 1 second. And we don't want the opacity to be a full 1, so let's just do 0.7. So it's like that. And then if we hover the button itself, we want the opacity to then be 1. So let's just do opacity 1. Okay, that doesn't seem to be working again. Yeah, of course, because this is being overwritten by its parent here, what we want to do is an important on this hover. And let's just do cursor pointer. Okay, great. So if we move this down to the second element, and save it, the same will work there. I now want to add this superhost div to one of the images. To do that, on the image div, I'm just going to add another class, underscore image, and then I'm going to do a hyphen, and I'm going to do superhost. Now this is going to allow me to target this element and whatever other element has this class on it. So I'm just going to copy this, and I'm going to do and hyphen superhost. With this superhost, we just want to do a pseudo element. So I'm going to do before, and I'm going to do position absolute. Then I'm going to do content, and I'm going to do superhost. So if I save this, go back to our page, you can see that it's up there. We're going to give it a background white. Let's give it a box shadow of 0 pixels, 2 pixels, 4 pixels. RGBA 0, 0, 0 for black, and then 0.18. Border radius of 4 pixels. Padding of 4 pixel, 8 pixels. And then let's just move it off the side by doing top 8 pixels, left 10 pixels, sorry. And that's there. And let's just do some letter spacing. So letter spacing 0.48 pixels and a font size of 12 pixels. I think we also need to change the font to medium. So let's just do font family, circular medium, and then let's just do text decoration. Now text transform, uppercase. Okay, so I'm now going to add the map to the page just so it looks a little bit more like Airbnb's site. Firstly, I'm going to change the map span to an empty div. I'm going to give it an ID of map. Then at the bottom of the page beneath body, I just want to do a script call. This is going to be basically an API request. I put in my own sort of key, my API key. You can redeem the key on your Google console. I'll put a link in the description. And essentially, when this does a request, is going to initiate a callback, and this callback is going to initiate this function which is called initMap. So we're going to need to build that function. So I'm just going to do we'll do a function called initMap, and we won't pass it any parameters. Then we'll just declare a variable called map, and we'll do new google.maps.map with a capital M, and then I'm going to define the element. So I'm going to do document.getElementById, pass it through the map ID, and then I just want to put some default sort of longitude and latitude. So I'm just going to do something random, and I'm just going to do zoom 8, so it zooms in a little bit. I'm going to save this. I'm just going to inspect my page to see if we've got any JavaScript errors. We haven't got any errors, which means the API call is probably working. Obviously the map isn't showing, so what we're going to do is, in the CSS, call the map ID, and do height 100%, width 100%, and go back to the map. Obviously the position is not correct at the moment, so let me just change this. And as you can see, this works just as it does on the Airbnb site. Obviously the functionality isn't there. But if you'd like me to cover in a future video linking the sort of hover state with the map itself, please leave a comment below. Also, if you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up.